All right. So, deck list review time. I'm going to have two different videos for this, but I'm going to do these out of order. I just want to talk about the NA championships before I talk about the Adelaide Materia Cup and the German Materia Cup and all the other big tourneys around. But news of the day, or of the week, the North American Championships 2024 Top Cut deck breakdown. So this the top 12 players here have all secured an invite to the World Championship in Japan in December. And the event was a lot of fun. The stream was great. Snugsy and Rainey did a fantastic job of running it. It seemed like the event itself was run really well. The commentary between Joe and Emo Tempest was incredible. And all in all, it was a super, super fun weekend. I enjoyed thoroughly wrecking my sleep schedule to watch it. But you all know me. When I see new deck lists, that means that I want to review them and see how I like them. So the winner of the tourney, this was a 2-deck format. So if you aren't familiar with 2-deck format, if you have any copies of a card in one deck, you can't have any copies of it in the other. So you end up having to build two very different deck lists, and you have to pilot both of them to success. This event had kind of a weird day one, but even so, you still had to win with both of your decks consistently to make it to Top Cut, and then in Top Cut to perform well, both your decks still had to keep winning. I think it definitely makes a difference, but I also do think that a lot of the best decks stayed the best decks regardless of the change in format very late. So Tori won, and I will give Tori a lot of credit. Tori played two completely unique decks in Top Cut. If you look at this, we have a Megissa and a Earth Water Monsters. There's not even another mono fire deck, let alone other Megissa. Even like the person that I would consider like the Megissa player in the world in Hunter Nance didn't even play Megissa. He took his fire slots and played Knights. And Tori was confident enough to take Megissa. And then, I mean, obviously Tori is always going to play a Realm deck. Like, that's just what Tori does. If you live in an A, you dust off those Neo X decks if you're going to a tourney. I'm sorry, Tori. But you end up with these two decks, which are completely unique, really, really strong, and really cool to watch, honestly. So let's start with the monsters. I think this is like, obviously this is Tori's bread and butter, and if Tori took this, this is probably the deck that he was most confident in of the monster brews he was working with. For context, I'm in pretty regular communication with Tori. I know a lot of the other decks he was considering, and I played against a lot of those, and this was my favorite by far of them, this Earth Water build. And I will say the wildest thing about this list to me is that Tori had room for 11 monsters and 11 summons and 12 forwards. Like, that is a wild number to me that we managed to somehow make room for all of this. And all of it's good too. So like card by card, Sophie is generally fine. I'm not a huge lover of Sophie right now. I just think that like a lot of times when she's good, you probably are already winning that game. Like the only card that like I love Sophie with like the Ceramobia stuff, and I mean you have Une as well, but you know it's a 1 of and a 2 of. Like you have to kind of be winning for Sophie to actually do the damage, draw the card. At which point she's pretty good. And I guess that like probably in Tori's mind, this is the closest you could get to playing Furion in this list. 2 copies of Mira. This card is still maybe one of my favorite cards in the entire game, and it's funny that like she fell so out of favor when the 1-cost EX burst, which granted the 1-cost EX burst is still, I think, one of the most broken commons of all time. But this one plays with Witch of the Fens really, really well. So I think that Witch as a card, obviously everybody's in agreement this is an extremely powerful card, but it is annoying that, first of all, she only hits 7, and 2 of the most important decks to play against right now, the forwards are 9Ks or 8Ks, so she doesn't clear them. And Mira gives Witch that reach. But also, because Mira is Reanimator, she brings back a monster. She actually gives Witch fuel. So Witch can even send something like a blue worm to kill something. And then you can just mirror that one back and then send it again. It just plays so well in every way with this card. And then the way that Mira interacted with cards like Buffasaur, where all of a sudden now you could be on, if you put this deck to damage 2, Tori could play Buffasaur, and now he's on damage 3, and he had a literal free removal spell. The removal spell kills a 10 king. Like this pops Warrior of Light with a Mira on field. I guess like technically Warrior of Light can ping the Mira off as the Buffasaur trigger happens. But just like some inspired deck building, honestly. Even stuff like the one copy of Haste Goblin, so that Mira has a really good reanimation target at all stages of the game. Generally, I'm a big fan of seeing a lot of 3-ofs, and there's not a lot of them, but Tori, instead of going for consistency, aimed for a toolbox approach, which I think is a really powerful option. Orcakis and Ishtola, these are going to be hard to cast in the deck, but they're really here for Elena. Orcakis is just kind of like worse Mira, but also like I imagine we probably just wanted the extra Crystal Chronicles search target. Really, really strong. 2 copies of Realm without the Larsa. I'm actually really shocked to see, but Gao obviously is really good roll compression. We have a bunch of monsters, so it's good removal. It gives some damage reach, kind of pseudo haste in a way for something like an Akalu. And something that I've actually really noticed with Gao coming up, playing Refia into it, is that because Gao puts the cards on the bottom of the deck, sometimes a deck like Refia does not have a way to search the deck if they're not on damage 3. Like, you can have 5 backups, and then, like, what do you do? Especially, like, if you can't Luna Freya, right? Like, you can't Luna Freya to proc the burst on the Tyro to shuffle the deck, and like you just kind of lose cards permanently sometimes when Gao enters play. I think that like that's like really underrated, just like how good the removal on that is. The 2 Une's obviously Une is, because this deck can go so fast at ramping and pushing through. Une actually can kind of be a big threat, and a threat before the opponent's ready for it, and without costing you like everything. Summons, we shave down everything to 2. Kind of wonder if it's better going like 3-3-3 and just cutting the cancel levies, but I also do understand that like cancel levy into like Karilla is really important, and like also you have the Shantoto LB, which people are going to absolutely prioritize. So maybe in that situation, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I want to see 3-ofs here, and I'm only seeing 2-ofs, which is always like a little bit scary because like you're just gonna see this when it's, or you're just not gonna see the Leviathan when it matters sometimes. But this deck does draw pretty efficiently. Maybe it's fine. Maybe we could have run like a Rydia or something to search out the cancel levy for when we get ahead. You could go like turn 1 backup, turn 2 realm, for Evre Atomos, search Leviathan, and now your opponent can't Shantoto you, and your Atomos gets to stick around for free. I think that seems pretty solid. But obviously, we need to get some number of bursts to give us a playable matchup into Chaos beyond kind of the Mist Dragon or Shantoto and Prey. For the monsters, lots of 1-ofs. Notably, everything is 2 or less, meaning that Mira is live very quickly. Any point of damage, obviously lets her cast half of these. The moment you get to 2, everything is live. And then you have the 3rd point of damage for the Atomos, obviously, to be kind of our mana doubler. And it's very easy to protect Atomos because of the power of cards like Witch, cards like Une, cards like Gao. And there is some really cool stuff that you can toolbox. You can make Mira into a completely free forward with Apkalu, right? You just revive the Apkalu. Piranha similarly allows you to have a kind of a damage threat in that 1 CP slot. Just like everything you could ever possibly want is in these slots. Even the ability to get some of these dead summons out of hand with the Echidna and cycle for better cards. Backups. We have 1 copy of Animist. I imagine this is so that we can Luso for an Earth backup if we need to. The card is clearly very strong. Uh, 3 copies of Lena. I know that Tori loves this card. I mean, every card. It's funny. I say it every time. Every single word of text on Lena matters, and it's why the card is good. Epitaphs. We can run a. We're not even on a King engine. We're on Epitaph. I guess we want a 3-cost backup to curve into. That's in Earth specifically. I wonder if this wouldn't be better as the Rydia, because then we can toolbox into our summons over the Epitaph. I know that the Mirror and the Larcacus are really nice, especially getting the Larcacus into the break zone early. But this only has 3 targets, and I feel like a lot of times we really want like to cancel that at the right time. 1 copy of Marrowweb. This is probably over the Larsa, because Larsa, like the Marrowweb searches everything the Larsa does, in addition to also searching some of the other cards. Makes a lot of sense. 1 copy of Sarah. I guess that gets our Epitaph and our Lena, and the Hilda. Just kind of strange to go 1/1/1 like that. It's not bad, like clearly, but the 1 copy of Hilda, mostly in here for the burst, I imagine, just trying to pad that count the tiniest little bit. The 1 copy Matoya, 2 Shantotos. I think Matoya, the more I played with it, the more slept on this card really is. Because I've been messing around with the forward Shantoto a lot, I've been really playing this Matoya. This card is really good. It's nice having a board wipe on a card that just doesn't have to be an expensive backup. It's just like you can kick it, pay almost the same as Shantoto, and get the same effect. And the 3 Tyros helps a lot with the Larcacus and the Ashtola, but the combination of the burst, the consistency, the ability to get the Realm, or the Gao, or the Witch, or the Mira, I imagine is the real reason this is in here. And then limit breaks seem pretty normal. Nothing really stands out here. I don't have a ton of summon or like EX bursts for Lunafreya, but you can go like a Lunafreya, Noctis, Leo line. I imagine Noctis is probably really important given the low forward count in the deck and how impactful all the entry effects on these forwards actually are. Obviously, Tidus to Leos is pretty common. The Matt plus Leo plus Tidus, Matt, Luso, Tidus, and the Shantoto. So all the modes make sense for our LBs. For Megissa, I think it's a relatively normal Megissa list. I think a lot of Megissa I've seen on like 3 Ayadolas. I can see that going down to make room for the extra monks. Almost a little surprised we didn't have like the 1 copy of Montleonis in the LB deck, but we're also really not expecting to get to 5 backups very often, even with the 3 monks doing unit backups that got printed. I really like the Mog in this meta, especially off of like an early Tyvus. You kind of have the 2 modes here with the Megissa and the Tyvus. You kind of pick which one works with you. It's also cool that like Tyvus can technically ping your Megissa with a ward. Obviously, we know that Tori is a big Minwoo believer based on his talk. I'm almost surprised there wasn't like 1 copy of a Brynhilder to go with the Minwoo. The card is just so strong with Brynhilder in particular because of the way that it kind of lets you stash a summon there. And Brynhilder can actually ping your own Megissa as well, which is really powerful. Maybe over something like the Bomb, I would think. But, I mean, obviously Megissa is a very strong archetype, lots of different options that it runs, toolboxes into all the 3 costs and fire. Really, really strong, cool deck. Second place, we had Ray G with one of the wildest lists of the event. This is Warrior Knights. So we still have room for 30 Knights, and then instead of running stuff like the utility stuff you might see, or something like the Renoa, we just ran Tyvus. It just said, you know, who needs any of this stuff? Even like 3 Axstar is strange to me because there's so few 3 costs that like Axstar is an answer to Knights in and of himself, because like, you know, if they go Karilla, hit 2 drops, and you go Tyvus, or you go to Axstar then like can kill, you know, say a Charlotte or a Lastwell and prevent any Knights from attacking the next turn, just kind of buy you time. So I'm very surprised to see this like such a heavy emphasis on Axstar with the Tyvus. I'm also like surprised to not see like 1 copy like Red 13, because you could do like I think like flashing in a Corilla for a turn, then having her die, especially in a deck without Renoa, is really powerful. Also, do not ever let this deck run into a Citadel, or I think it is just kind of dead on the spot. Also, very fire heavy, which could be a little bit rough for like the fact we need the backups. Also notable is we're on Lena as our secondary backup. I started calling this a little bit towards the beginning of the set with all the chaos around, that because the burst density in most decks is so high, I actually think any aggro deck should consider running Lena, because she's very likely to draw cards to try to combat the advantage your opponent's getting off of free bursts. And in this situation, even like you can revive a Last Well, for instance, is very strong as well. Reviving a Mog. So just a cool tech card. Really just has the one weakness to Citadel, which I haven't seen in like almost any list. Deck of the tourney was Mono Earth. I talked about it a little bit. I had a buy in the RLS locals, which I play every Wednesday night, or I guess it'd be like super early Wednesday for North American people. But you can watch it either on here or on my Twitch stream. But Mono Earth was like the deck of the tournament. Everybody was on it. This is about as like standard as it gets. There's kind of two variants. There's like, my other deck is water, so I need to run fire, so I'll run Amaterasu and Terra. And there's my other deck is running fire, so I'm gonna run Leviathan and Une in this build. It's the best deck in the format. It's got a lot of very strong. It's got a very strong matchup spread. There's very little that it actually like loses to. I think that like probably the big thing to look for European Continentals and Australian Continentals is finding a matchup that you think beats Mono Earth consistently, because I would expect to see a lot of it at both of those events. Mike was on again, Mono Earth, without any, like, no Lev 6s actually, because we are using our Lev 6s and our Amaterasus here. So this is like a Mono Earth. Again, very standard, nothing too crazy here. And kind of the other big breakout like card of the event was like Tyvis. Tyvis was, I would say, Tyvis was the second best performing card of the entire tourney as far as like big archetypal cards goes. So really interesting to see. Also interesting to see like the emphasis on Zidane in these lists, given that like the only way to play Zidane is either off of an Edgar or off of Tyvis Axstar Zidane. So, but like we're still on 3 full copies of Zidane to try to line it up. Obviously, Zidane is really powerful, and with all the combo decks in the format, it allows you to combat that a little bit. But it is a card that's kind of dead sometimes, I find. So I'll be interested to see if that continues, especially as we continue to progress into more and more sets. Maybe fire and water get like better warrior support, for instance, that like makes the Zidane less relevant. I mean, maybe it'll always be relevant. I mean, the ability to attack the player's hand is very strong, obviously. Even with my misgivings on Zidane as a card. Obviously, I'm kind of an outspoken person saying I think the card is a bit overrated, but I think the current meta is actually better than it's probably ever been, for better or worse. To the point where, like I said, I was even playing like the hand rip one. So, continuing on, Hunter Nance. This is Pure Knights. I'm just gonna start skipping the Mono Earths, unless there's something that I didn't remember being really interesting in them. Very standard Knights. 1 copy for Noah, which I think 1 copy for Noah at minimum is really important in Knights, because one of the things that ends up happening in Knights is you want to stop Corilla, and then you want her to just sit on the field for the rest of the game. And I think that having the 1 copy for Noah that you can Larsa for, in theory, or Ezreal for, puts a lot of pressure on your opponent to have removal or like a second way of stopping Corilla from doing the thing. I'm still not a big fan of the extra Ramza. I sort of get why it's here, but like because the only ways of generating crystals are with like the ice Agrius attacking, which this deck isn't even playing, or the 3 copies of Lilith, like I don't know. I just feel like locking yourselves out of a name is a little scary. Very cool to see the Garland backup show up here. There's a lot of utility that you can gain from this and closing games out with something like maybe you're way ahead and you don't have the Garland on field. You can go Gawain for Steiner plus Garland, use the Garland as a mind control, and just kind of win the game on the spot, right? Similarly, the one copy of Sid Randell could be really, really powerful given the right matchup. I like that we're on the Cullens ourselves to deal with opposing Sid Randell. It's just a really strong Knights list, to be quite honest. So take a quick peek real quick here. This should be on like the Leviathans stuff. It's not on the Leviathans, but it's on like the Unis and the Garnets. Again, very standard mono earth, just one of the best decks. Sergio had 2 unique decks. We had a Bart's build of Refia. Still managed to get to 16 bursts in the deck. Isn't playing the King Tycoons, which I think is kind of like the thing that sold me on playing Bart's in Refia. One copy of Terra. Obviously, I'm a huge fan of Terra. We'll get to that when we talk about the Adelaide Materia Cup, why I really like this card. Very interesting to see this arc show up over the 5 cost. I'm just such a big believer in the 5 cost arc that even though this one has a much more relevant burst, and like it does matter that getting your like Refia into being a higher power, I would just be a little bit scared of that. But it is very cool seeing the ability to add to your like relevant burst count. Notably, because our other deck is using our Cullens, we don't have them in here. So one of our most important bursts is not in the deck at all. That is a concession that I imagine probably would not be taken otherwise. I probably would go like, well, I'd be interested to see what the difference would be without the 2 deck stipulation there. For deck B, we're on like pretty interesting build of Scions. It's really Scions are very strange to me because the best backups in Scions are all water. Alphino, Tataru, Urianger. But like, look at these forwards. None of these are water. So you're kind of like playing backups to enable forwards that don't actually want what the backups are giving, which is like a weird nombo to me. I think that like the Y'shtola split, like a lot of this is pretty standard. The Y'shtola split, cool to see the 3 Irvine show up, but I do wonder like if there is something better to be doing with the water in this deck. And granted, some of the water payoffs are already burned over here potentially. It's a really weird conundrum, honestly, that like, you know, again, Urianger, Tataru, Alphino, these are really, really strong cards. And I guess part of the argument would be that, like, well, Tataru isn't really a water backup. She's like a backup that instead just draws a card every turn. And maybe that's the logic. I do love seeing Xeno see some play here. I think this card is criminally underrated into aggro decks. Something like, say, Chaos. You can ditch the Xenos, cast it, make your opponent discard a card, and also clear one of the disciplinary committee members. Just you know, very, very strong. You can also hold it, use it as a big blocker to prevent them from getting in, and then when they kill it, you can do it again to clear the field. And then also, because it's category 14, you get the haste off of Y'shtola if you really want it. You know, not that like Xenos doesn't have ways of getting haste if he really wants it, but you could even theoretically have him force the discard to turn off like an Amaterasu, then get this Y'shtola into play, dull the Y'shtola to give the Xenos haste. Like that's like a totally reasonable line that you could go for instance. So I wouldn't mind like seeing a little bit better, like more of a water payoff, especially like the Luna Freya's over here. Despite the fact that like there's more bursts in the other deck, I might have considered flipping those. Maybe the Noctises over here just kind of felt more impactful. So we have a mono water list here. This is a pretty interesting list. Only 11 forwards. Shinryu really fallen out of favor in mono water just because Shinryu does not have a good line into Chaos. So you see a lot more of water leaning into stuff like bursts. I've loved seeing the 3 anima in here. I think this card has been really, really good at kind of a lot of decks right now are playing very low forward counts. You can kind of just use Anima to stall them out. The big one being like Refia. You like Refia has to almost hold Mist Dragon for this. 3 Medines is really cool, especially with like the Lusos and the Shinryus. I'm a big believer in Citra Medine, especially with like, the number of summons here, but I do understand what we're going for with this. Obviously, Sahagin Chief, Leviathan, Lena. Just a lot of really good cards. Yagrosh is just a really nice, easy card to be able to tech in, as is like Cloud of Darkness to get a pretty solid board wipe that also like develops your field a bit. And then Mono Earth, we also ran the Zidane in here, which makes sense with cards like the Riku and the Leo. Riku's kind of an interesting tech as well. And moving along, I believe this looks like, yeah, pretty classic Refia control from Brian. On the Demon, instead of like the Terra slot, obviously most North American players are going to bump the Zidane to 3. Even as looking Air is on even 3 Zidane right now as well. Surprised we went down to 2 Amaterasu, 2 Kusith. I really like find these cards are super impactful and important. 19 backups. No Ingus backup is a little bit surprising. The Lunith. Everything else makes a lot of sense. We bumped to a second Shantoto, which can make a lot of sense against the aggro. And second deck was Chaos. We used a much larger 8 package than normal. It's going to make our Ezels a little bit more difficult to use because of the Cypher and the Idea. But I get it. Like the Cypher, you could get another haste forward off of the Raijin that also like deals with stuff. I know that a friend of mine in Australia, Rob, is a big fan of Ultimecia in Chaos because if they don't deal with the break zone, you can kind of just use their threats against them, which is both very funny and very strong. Notable one-ofs here that really pop out to me. This Behemoth is really interesting for an aggro deck. If you go like back up, the next one you can do this. Now all of a sudden your opponent needs to get 2 forwards out to ever be able to block again if they can't clear this Behemoth. And a lot of monster breaking is targeted on small monsters in particular, so this card might stick around for a very long time. Just a really interesting tech card for sure. Fire, water, pretty standard. This is like the NATO water fire warriors. Not too much to say there. Mono Earth from Sam. I actually knew about some of these techs ahead of time. Zidane, this apparently was a late replacement for 19 Legend. I know that Sam was worried about decking out, or losing deck out wars. And in the mirror, the Zidane actually is really strong. Anytime that there's a mirror match, the Zidane is really good. But also because Earth ends up stacking removal against each other, board wipe into board wipe into board wipe into board wipe, this Zidane allows you to kind of, you can board wipe your opponent, and then you kind of end up in a situation in Mono Earth like sure, you can swing your Warrior of Light, do a point of damage, but you're going to get wiped back. Like that just kind of is the way the cadence of the way the match plays. So one of the best things you can do in that situation is just drop a Zidane and draw 2 cards from opponent's deck. You're both guaranteeing you're going to win the deck out race, and you're drawing 2 cards to a zone that your opponent doesn't get to interact with, and you're doing them another point of damage. It makes a lot of sense if you expect the holder to do Mono Earth. Similarly, this Terra against any control mirror is absurd. I think the only deck that maybe she doesn't have a good thing to do against is like Refia for that. But I noticed that because all of our backups can tap for any color, this Terra can be anything from Kurosame and just freezing 5 characters if you want to pitch from hand to player. Or it could be Rishidan Port is the magic card where it's just like dull a character, or like Liliset is the magic or the FF equivalent, which is just like dull a backup, dull a character, dull a backup, dull a character. You can kind of just like tap down your opponent's stuff as they start trying to do things. She's the ability to be a 4 CP removal spell. She dodges removal herself because she can make her big. She also does haste. Just like a very interesting toolbox card that I think had a lot of potential over some of the other options that you'll see like Fusoya or anything else. And I think that it also like occupies a very funny headspace in your opponent's like mind when you're playing the card, because if you're in Earthmere and you see this in your opponent's deck, you're going to be like, what am I doing? Like, if this comes down, I'm going to lose if I don't have like removal. So you have to like hold Titans in ways you don't want to, and just ends up being a really obnoxious card. I'm a big fan of the card. I think Sam even said himself that it was fine, but he probably wouldn't run it again. Ryan did the exact thing that I think everybody expected, which was play Mono Earth. Notable change here: Galuf was not in any of his previous Mono Earth builds. Just checking to see how far into this I am. It's about 30 minutes. We're doing good. We lost to Hythlodaeus from the one that won in Portland, but we swapped in the Apparuru. This is pretty standard at this point. The rest of this all makes a lot of sense. It's pretty standard. Also, Fenrir came in. Fenrir's good. Just a free summon that breaks the lighter dark forward could be a good tech against Chaos, for instance. You can drop down something cheap and then pop it, or like Kryl it back out. Kryl's actually another pretty interesting card. Y'shtola. Some interesting spice here for sure. And then Mono Water. It's really funny hearing Ryan's interview on this deck. It says, yeah, I was really greedy, and I see this deck, and I go, yeah, you were greedy as fuck, my friend. A 1/1 Lenalev combo is like, it almost makes me wonder if you should have just run the backup Lena instead. I get the idea is like the Lena is such a big threat when it does happen that like having access to it can make your opponent play in a different way. X and Mill ended up being a really solid card because of the lack of ways of interacting with it. I think that there are things that people can do to deal with this card that they might not have been, but if you're not prepared and not ready to deal with a card like X and Melee, you just kind of have this weird 2CP 9K that also is playing cards from deck. Amazed that he's on 3 Rahal. I really am not sure about that one, to be quite honest. There's some cool stuff like maybe protecting a card from dying to Amaterasu, like the Glaciella. You could like, if you play Glaciella from hand, you can X and Melee out the Rahal to keep the Glaciella from dying and get a Crystal Fodder potentially. But I think I might go to 2 of that, and like bump the Lena or the big Levy. The rest of this, for the most part, I think makes a lot of sense. Right. Chris Lopez and KP were on the exact same decks. They were on Chaos and Mono Earth. I'm pretty sure they were the exact same 50 between both of them because they're playtest partners. And in general, I think this is my favorite Chaos list I've seen as far as like tech cards. I think the Estinian is genuinely kind of inspired because like Chaos doesn't need more threats on field a lot of the time. The ability to threaten a threat 2 turns from now. You'll see a lot of people on stuff like the Roche. It's like Roche does a point of damage for a card in hand. For the same cost, Estinian does it twice, but also doesn't die with the rest of the field if your opponent has to Shantoto immediately to not die, right? So I think that like Estinian is just kind of better Roche for the deck, and the only cost, if you want to call it that, is that Ezel now can't search this Chaos as consistently, but you could still search this Chaos. So I would like always agree on that. I'm not a big fan of the Lev 6 in this deck. I know that he has a really great video you should go check out where he talks about his decisions. And again, and this is Chris Lopez's as well, but again, same list, where they said this was for the mirror, and I sort of get that, but like if you're only running 2 copies of a card in the mirror for like the chance of a burst, it's such a low chance. And I don't imagine that they're really hard casting this card very often to win the mirror. Maybe I could be wrong, but I feel like if you're opponent in a Chaos Mirror takes 6 CP to cast a Leviathan to not cast Chaos and try to kill you with it. You probably feel pretty good about that. Love the Alize backup choice. I know that like she's going to be live in weird times. Like you probably have to get your first mill before she gets you a search, but like she still does get you a search. Like you can go like Ezel, Chaos, and then like the next turn go Alize, get another Chaos out of the deck. And she even gets like the Chaos backup, so you don't draw the backup late game. Really, really cool. Only other change that I would consider is Melusine is really not bad in Chaos if you wanted the Lightning monster. Like if you want to go like one Spectral Keeper or one Melusine. And Sophie is so hard to make live in this. Like you have to control Lightning and Matt and Leo or Luna Freya, or you have to like have Sarah Mobius and Sophie in a deck with like 7 Earth cards. So it helps search for Chaos, but I would honestly consider running like even almost like an Une or something, or like a Garnet Vanille, the 2-cost Vanille, the Earth Lightning Vanille. I think could have been really good to kind of bump the Earth count and then also make our Lightning a little bit more consistent. That would have put us at, I guess, 21 Lightning cards, 20 Water cards. And like I could see a world where like playing that Vanille to tax a Shantoto wins you the game. So that like a Shantoto can't resolve anymore. And then the Mana Earth, this is, again, pretty standard. We're on the fire side instead. No Terras, but I mean the 3 Amaterasus, obviously, because the Leviathans are in this build. DN, Mono Earth. This one had probably the funniest tech of any deck at the tourney, which is Leslie. I am not sold on this card in the slightest. Again, the idea could be like, oh, I can go Emmett Selk for Leslie and then give my Chaos opponent Leslie, and it's like the Emmett Selk isn't killing anything on Chaos's field, so they can, you know, you're spending 8 CP in hand to not clear the field versus just like even searching something like a Shantoto out or like so many other cards. But it's really cute. I will give credit where credit is due on that. I think that it's very funny. Rest of the deck is pretty standard. Lastly, again, this is the Warriors deck that's been so popular. Just a quick like call attention. Matt Smith is a really good friend of both mine and D's and everyone in DFW's. He very, very sadly passed away and couldn't make it to Worlds this year despite qualifying. Was a very avid Warriors player himself, so I'm very, happy that D was able to pilot, a deck that, one of his friends and rivals was like known for to such success. So I know that Matt's out there watching somewhere, and we all miss him. So, but yeah. All right, moving back towards the rest of this. Jonathan G, we got Knights with 3 full copies of Vanilla. Interesting. I'm surprised to see. I haven't seen any Knights playing Parai, now that I think about it. Kind of an interesting thing. This deck also, yeah, these decks were not respecting Sid Randell, which is interesting. Sid is not great into Chaos, but it's not terrible into Chaos. You don't get the discard 2 off of Chaos, so it's kind of like it kind of just makes things a little awkward. Deck B was Water Lightning, like EX Burst, again, 28 bursts. A lot of fun cards that just haven't seen play in a long time. This Porum, we're on Kadaj. Very much the European style of this deck. Stuff like the Cindy, the Raijin backups to enable the Cypher. Only 1 Cypher for the Raijin? Interesting. That's actually kind of surprising to me. You can lend it in the Alba for the break if you want it. It's a cool list. Not sure that I love the Justinian. Again, I know the idea with a lot of these decks sometimes is that into like other aggro decks, like you can like warp the Justinian, try to kill your opponent, and then if your opponent tries to go aggro to stop your aggro, then your 28 bursts win you the game. And if they don't go aggro into your aggro, you kind of kill them. So It's just a very strange archetype that I've never really loved, but I do understand why it's strong. KP, we've talked about. Christopher Neal, Mono Earth, nothing too spicy or crazy here. Yeah. Deck B, I believe this is just going to be the Warriors stuff. Yeah, again, Warriors at a very high conversion rate relative to its representation at the event. Some Water Lightning and Mono Earth again. Mono Earth's on 3 Terra, 3 Terrasi, kind of like the Steve D style. And I think this is the same list that Jonathan was on for the Water Lightning. And then we have the kind of a similar Scions list. Again, really interesting seeing the deck play so much water in the backups and then really not care about it in the forwards. But and then also one of the more interesting Refia builds that we've ever seen. This is Water Fire Refia. There's no Earth, which I consider Earth to be like one of the core colors for Refia, given that Kryl and Tyro and Warrior of Light are all in the deck. Like, you have more Earth Warriors of Light than almost any other. So seeing this take on, it's definitely an interesting one. It's definitely cool that there is the Tyvis, but only the there's the 3 Warrior of Light backups as well, so maybe we can just you can probably get to those. But it's interesting to see. Also very funny to see this Warrior of Light show up. Very strong card, actually. Just a free reveal 4. Pick a card you can play at this turn. Very good at helping you set up, while also being good fodder for Refia to help deal with aggression. Very cool list. I might give this a try sometime. And that was the North American Championships. Again, huge congratulations to Tori Kelly and the rest of the North American Worlds team. And I will be back soon with a breakdown of Adelaide and the German Materia Cup. So thanks for watching.